Welcome to the Northern Leaders Podcast. This is a podcast that celebrates the North and it celebrates leadership. And we've got some fascinating guests who are included in our Northern Leaders list. And that's certainly true for our first guest today. Matthew Scullion is the chief executive of a tech business called Matillion. Now, they found fame in 2021 when they became a fabled tech unicorn. That's not something that Matthew's obsessed about. He's all about building a business that's going to change the world. Now, I first met Matthew all the way back in 2012. Way back then, he was in Knutsford. It's fair to say that Matthew is different to that person that I met all those years ago, but not as a person, just in terms of as a CEO, he's had to adapt. He uses a phrase actually that he doesn't want to be the person he was 2 years ago. So he's constantly evolving and adapting. Now, Matillion's based in Salford, employs nearly 500 people. We've got a big presence in the US as well. He's got 2 kids. He's a multiple award winner. But I think what you'll find is why he's included in the Northern Leaders, because he's authentic. He's a genuine leader. He's a really, really nice guy. I'm hoping all those things will come out when we interview him after this break, after we thank our sponsors, who are Wildbrook Commercial Real Estate. This episode of Northern Leaders is sponsored by Wildbrook Commercial Real Estate. Wildbrook is an independent commercial property investment advisory business acting for investors on the purchase and sale of commercial properties. And after this short interval, we'll be hearing from Matthew Scullion. So Matthew, it's a big Northern Leaders podcast. Welcome to Matthew Peter Scullion. Absolutely, I've done my homework. The CEO of tech unicorn Matillion. Welcome.
Thanks so much, Chris. Thanks for the Sunday name as well.
Absolutely. Well, I wanted to find out what it was, but I was rather hoping it would be something a bit more racy than Peter. But no, listen, delighted that you're here today. This is a new podcast, but we start every podcast with the same 2 questions. The first question is, what does the North mean to you?
Home. Ambition, the people I like, grit, and I think, can I go with something like resurgence, Chris? Like, we were the capital of the Industrial Revolution. We've taken a break. We're on our way back.
I agree with everything you've said there. I think the North is just friendly. I'm not saying the South is unfriendly, but it's not as friendly. Second question we always ask on this podcast is, this is the leadership podcast. You've been a leader since the age of 17 when you set your first business up. How do you define leadership?
How do I define leadership? That's a great question. Where I immediately go to is it's a number of things, but I think ultimately there's not a lot that you can get done that changes the world on your own. It's changing the world's a team sport. And I guess the leader's ultimate job is to bring together that team and then help rally them and align them, get them excited about a goal, a shared goal, as I would say in work, Chris. And create that environment to succeed for that team. I think fundamentally that's what a leader is.
Neil MacArthur, who's best known for TalkTalk, but now runs Freedom Fibre, he always talks about the analogy that you can have 3 lottery numbers, but unless you find the person who's got the 4th and the 5th and the 6th number, you're only going to make a tenner or 20 quid. And leadership for him was bringing those people together, which I think, and I know people really well who you work with, and they say that's what you do. You bring people together to create a team, and that's leadership. You're a native of Altrincham. I think you originally hail from Glossop area and Stalybridge, and you're from a family of makers. So what was the young Matthew like?
So yeah, I was from Glossop. My dad's family were from Stalybridge, but I was born in Glossop. That was pretty early in the innings, to be fair. I think we moved over to Altrincham when I was about 4. What was the young Matthew like? I mean, depends how young you're going. Like, I was an only child. People like to cast judgment on that, don't they? So I don't know, really. I think I was probably a fairly normal kid. My mother was a primary school teacher. My father was a salesperson. He was a sales manager that sold rivets and fasteners. Yeah, I mean, I went to a normal state but nice primary school, and one thing I occasionally say, because I'm very grateful about it, is I feel very lucky about where I went to secondary school. I went to Altrincham, still got the grammar school system, and I went to Altrincham Grammar, and I really enjoyed that.
I'm going to ask you about your time at Altrincham Grammar School.
Oh, you want to come back to that
in a second?
Yeah.
What I find interesting though is that I've met a lot of successful entrepreneurs who are only children, and I wonder if you look back on your career, is that a contributory factor? Were you on your own, left to your own devices? Were you spoiled? What was it like being an only child?
Well, I don't know, because you can't do an A/B test on yourself, can you? But I will say personally, I don't really like that kind of, you're an only child thing. Probably none of us like any of those things, do we? But I definitely don't think I was spoiled. I mean, we weren't a sort of wealthy family or anything like that. Being totally honest, I will tell you that like at times when I was a kid, life at home wasn't particularly simple. Both of my parents independently had their own challenges. And so I do think it is fair to say that from quite a young age, I probably had to take quite a lot of responsibility in the house and for my own decisions. And that probably meant, I've got children now that are older than I was when it was like that. And I definitely wasn't living their life. And so I think it probably does give you an independence and a clarity of purpose and a resilience. And those, as it turns out, are definitely things that are very handy when it comes to business building later in life.
I agree. I don't think my kids live the life that I led, and I don't think I led the life that my parents led before. I think it's a generational thing. I'm going to ask you about your ability to speak French. Okay. When I was doing my research, I stumbled across an interview in 2021 in the Sunday Times.
Sounds ominous, Chris.
It does sound ominous. It does. And it is ominous.
Right.
And I've known you for like 13, 14 years, and I want you to read it. Okay. And I'll know whether or not it's true.
This bit highlighted.
That highlighted, yeah.
This was in the Sunday Times, was it?
It was, yeah.
Matthew Scullion's French teacher at Altrincham Grammar School for Boys, one Mr. Cleland, did not rate his chances of landing a good grade at GCSE and predicted an E. Scullion, a cheeky, slightly belligerent teenager, decided to prove him wrong. He crammed for 24 hours, came in the next day for his oral exam, got lucky with the question. Yeah, that's true. And I got an A.
That's completely true. Mr. Cleland's not here to speak for himself, clearly, but what was that like? I mean, were you a cheeky? You don't strike me as belligerent. That was a word I wouldn't use to describe you, but was that fair?
I was a bit cheeky, if I'm honest with you. Some of that, it's down to the teacher as well, isn't it? So with some of the teachers, you'd be a bit cheeky, make them laugh, and that would build a rapport. And other teachers, you'd be a bit cheeky and they would perhaps respond by saying, I don't like that very much, and shut you down. I don't think I was terrible, if I'm honest with you, but I was a bit cheeky. But the story about the French thing is true. And it was, he did predict me an E. I think he was an E. He predicted me a bad grade. And I thought that showed great audacity from him, and I was outraged that he would be so cheeky. He was, of course, entirely right. If he plotted the curve of my progress in French over the prior 2 years, it was heading towards an E. Yes, I was furious. So I proved him wrong, Chris.
But I think you've done that a lot during your career. I think, people talk about sliding doors moments, and the sort of character and the personality that you are is probably summed up there quite neatly. You mentioned French. When I was at school, we had a French teacher called Mr. Stone, and he was trying to get the kids to understand something, and he got everybody to write, I was 11, Christopher as une grande la tête, which basically means Christopher has a big head, which you knew already because French is, a subject that you know well.
Nailed it.
Absolutely. It's the one line that I remembered, and I thought to myself, couldn't get away with that today.
That's pretty mean.
It was pretty mean, actually. And actually, there's a few teachers said a lot worse about me, but I did have a large head. It was true. When you were at school, you had to do a work placement, and you did it at an IT department of an outdoor clothing company. You offered a summer job. Such was your performance. And on the back of that, you ended up co-founding a business at the age of 17 and not going to university. Right. That's about 3 sliding door moments in one go. Tell us about that.
Yeah, gosh, you've been doing your research, haven't you? So, at the secondary school I went to did a sixth form version of work experience, and you were meant to go and try and get a job that you actually might want to do. So if you wanted to be a doctor, you go to a hospital, and you wanted to be a vet, you'd go to a veterinary surgeon. I just knew I wanted to be in business, and I didn't really have a more precise definition than that. Anyway, I ended up getting a placement in the IT department, as you say, at Regatta, the north face of Trafford Park, and it was pretty good. Actually, I turned up on the Monday and no one knew I was coming, and they tried to find me some work to do, and I spent the whole week organising copies of floppy disks and CDs in a fire safe the entire week. But on the Friday afternoon, the manager of the department, a guy called Neil, who I'm still friends with today, he comes in. He is the guy I presume that was meant to have remembered I was coming. But he comes in and he basically says, "Oh, you look like a likely lad. Would you like a summer job?" And that was quite Neil, I went on to discover. And so, I over the summer was given a laptop and a desk and an instruction manual. And they said, teach yourself how to do this Lotus Notes programming. Yeah. Lotus Notes was a popular software platform. So by the end of the summer, I could do that. And it turned out they'd been paying some contractor £650 a day to do this Lotus Notes development. And, for the business people that they were like, how does £2.80 an hour sound? I replaced the work of this guy on £650 a day on £2.80 an hour. But as to sliding doors, yes and no, right? I mean, I think there's probably... there's definitely a great degree of serendipity on everything we all do in lives, but also I think if you show up and you're interested and you're energetic about things, and I've always been, if I'm interested in something, if I want to do something, I've always found it quite easy to get to get quite focused on it. And I suppose if you put yourself in the active site where things could happen and then you run at it, it's more likely perhaps that chances will come from it. So
I think though that there aren't many 17-year-olds who set up a tech company, which is what you did. Left the education system, set up a tech company, grew it to a point, you got bought by a US company, you're still a teenager. I mean, that's not atypical, but did you always love tech? Was it always, did you know at that age, I am going to be a tech CEO?
No, I didn't always love tech. I would say I was interested, but I wasn't a kind of talented programmer like Bill Gates was by the time he was 17. And I wasn't particularly looking for a tech career. I did know what I wanted to be in business. And if you ask me why, I don't really have a good answer for that, to be honest. I just did. I think it might have been because when my dad went to work, he wore a suit and I thought it was cool. But I knew I wanted to be in business. And then the founding of that company, so just to be clear there, so I don't rewrite history in my favor, this guy, Neil, who ran the IT departments at this company that I happened to be doing work experience in, he came to me and said, I'm thinking of setting up a company. Would you like to do it? And I was just finishing my levels, probably should have gone off to university through their normal course of events. But then again, it's not that uncommon to take a gap year before university. So I think I thought to myself at the time, this sounds fun. I'll try it out. If it works out, great. I'm off and away. And if it doesn't, well, it's a year's cool work experience and I can go off to university at a later date. But what is true is, maybe where that left me by the time I was 21 and 25 and 30 and 40, someone asked me the other day, I've been leading teams, managing people, building things around software for 29 years and I'm 46. So that's probably an uncommon thing to be able to say. But then separately, if a little bit like that French thing, really, if I want to do the thing, I've always found it quite easy to get excited about it and drive very hard on it. Conversely, by the way, if I don't want to do the thing, then I find it quite difficult to motivate myself around it. So I'm a kind of, I mean, I'm sure there's many people like that, but that's useful and perhaps correlated to people that want to build things like businesses, because you're going to have to run very hard at it. And that's maybe only possible if you're the sort of person that finds it easy to run very hard at something they want to achieve. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And what you say about if you're enthused by something, you love doing it, sort of really resonates for me. So I'm a twin. So my dad wanted me and my brother to play the piano.
Right.
So he insisted that we spent 1 hour every night playing the piano. Well, my brother loved it.
Yeah.
And you would hear him
going by for him.
Yeah, go up and down the chords, playing fantastic like pieces of music. And there was me, mother had the washing on the line, which was a one thing. And I did that for an hour. Literally, I only used about 6 of the keys. But Dad insisted that I would actually learn to love the piano. I never learned to love the piano. And that's the point. If you love something, you do it. I'm going to fast forward to 2011. And I'm going to talk about your co-founder as well, Ed Thompson. You've always been incredibly modest. You don't want to take credit for stuff that's, the business was co-founded. And even though you tend to be more of the public-facing part of Matillion, I think it's fair to say, you and Ed, you quit your jobs in order to change the world. You had an idea around business intelligence and you co-founded Matillion. What problem were you and Ed trying to fix when you launched Matillion?
Not the problem that we solve today, but in the same category. So Ed and I, poor old Ed, I mean, we've been working together for our entire careers. So in that little startup you mentioned that I got involved with when I was 17, I think by the time I was 20, Ed was also working at it. So poor guy's been stuck with me his entire adult life. I should apologize to him for that at some point. But the last thing we'd been doing before founding Matillion was, we spent years building software and doing projects for customers. We'd also normally done that in companies that had a hardware component to them as well. Software guys that work in companies like that, they don't really like the hardware guys, because the hardware guys, they drive a Porsche and wear a suit that's a bit too shiny, and they don't have a computer science degree, but they make 10 times more money than you, because when they sell a £3 million server, they get 10% commission on it, right? So software guys were always a bit scathing about that. And this thing came along called the cloud. And the cloud was like, well, you can have a server, you can have compute and storage just by clicking a button, and no £3 million server with a 10% commission check and a, hardware sales guy at a Porsche needs to be part of it. And so we naturally gravitated towards the cloud. The other thing we'd been doing a lot of over the prior couple of years was around data analytics projects. And at the time, I remember reading in Gartner that data analytics was always either number 1 or number 2 of the CIO's priorities in a business. And yet the failure rate around business intelligence projects, analytics projects, was 70%. So you had this asymmetry between very important thing to business leaders, hard to land the plane on. And so we thought, well, I wonder if we could make that better using this new thing that we like called the cloud. And therefore we founded a company, Matillion, to work at the intersection of cloud and data. And that's really where it came from. But the original solution isn't what we do today. We're in a way, we're definitely a pivot story.
I'm going to talk to you about the pivot in a second. What does Matillion mean?
It doesn't mean anything, I don't suppose, but it's just my name squashed together.
Right.
So Matthew Scullion, I'll have to peter out. I, on the run up to thinking about founding a business, was trying to think of a company name, sat in my spare bedroom at our old house, and we're all better at some things than others, aren't we? And it turns out I'm not very good at thinking of company names. In my defense,
not a lot of people are.
Yeah, it's harder than it sounds, because it means to not really mean anything, but kind of sound a bit technology-y.
Yeah.
You need to be able to pronounce it. It needs to not have been used by someone else. The .com needs to be available, and ideally, if you translate it into other languages, it means to not accidentally mean, Matthew is a Wally.
Yeah.
And by the time you put those criteria against it, it's actually quite hard to come up with something. And so I'm sat in my spare room for months trying to come up with something. And I think my wife just got irritated with me one day, and she walks into the room and she's like, "You're still trying to come up with a company name?" And I was like, "Yes, darling." And she's like, "Why don't you call it Matillion, you idiot?" I was like, "Oh yeah, that's really good." And so that's where it came from.
What's your wife's name?
My wife's name is Caroline.
We need to give Caroline some credit, because hopefully she's listening to this podcast right now, and that's finally been recognised. What I want to try and do with the Northern Leaders podcast is sort of, it's not your typical podcast. And I was thinking back to when I first met you, and I did my homework. I looked through all the email exchanges, all the interviews that I've done with you, and it was 2012. And I was trying to remember the circumstances to that. You were based in Booth Park in Knutsford, small office. I think you had 12 staff at the time. And you had a PR company called Firework Public Relations. And I went down memory lane this week, actually, in readiness for this interview, because it was run by the brilliant Claire Wall and the late great Andrea Houseman, who died in 2020, tragically too young as well. And they said to me, "You've got to meet this guy, Chris." This was Claire, who literally sold every client she's ever worked with. They were all amazing. According to Claire, she said, "You've got to meet this guy. He's a one-off. Come in the office, you won't forget him," like that. And I went in and I met you, and you're wearing a shirt and tie, and you're very different to what you are now. Do you remember anything about that first meeting? And false modesty aside, be honest.
Of course, yeah. I remember the entire movie of Matillion in HD. And yeah, the only thing, mate, I don't necessarily agree with is that I'm completely different from back then.
I don't think you're different in terms of you as a person. I don't. The way I think you're slightly different is, I think back then you were a shirt and tie person. You were smartly dressed. You're smartly dressed now, digging myself in a hole here, not trying to, but you're smartly dressed now. But you were probably, you wear gilets, you wear cardigans, you're more casual now. And I don't know if that's something that comes with getting older, or whether or not in that tech scene. I went to the Northern Tech Awards and I had to take my tie off because I was the only one in there with a tie other than Will Lewis at OBI. You've got to adapt, haven't you? You've got to adapt as a CEO to the industry that you're working in.
I think the only thing that changed there is who I was selling to. Because when you first met me, I was selling to finance directors of mid-sized UK companies. We had a customer that made train sets and little racing car games. Yeah. We had a customer that made nuts and bolts. We had a customer that made shortbread. And when you go to see the finance director of a 50 million quid British company and a trading estate in Telford, you wear a shirt and tie. I think if I was to wear a shirt and tie in your average tech meeting, to your point, I'd probably be the only guy like you were that day. So I guess to an extent, it's a bit of a uniform. I do remember, though, just to maybe point out the hazard of that line of thinking, there is a corporate financier who at the time, and I think possibly still, works in the North region, who I'd gotten to know over a period of a couple of years, probably about that time that we met as well. When we met, the business was small and it was growing slowly. And then a few years later, as you know, we kind of pivoted, hit a bit of exit velocity, needed the help of a corporate financier. And apparently, it's weird with corporate financiers, you're going to spend money with them, but because it's contingent, they probably will only take the work if they think they've got a high probability of landing the plane. And this guy elected to not take the work because I wore a suit and tie. Now, we've since raised $300 million in venture capital, so I'm not necessarily sure judging someone on how they dress worked out that well on that particular occasion. But yeah, I think all that's changed to me, mate, is I just sell to different people and therefore no longer need to three-piece it for work.
The thing is about you, and I'm not being like sycophantic as well, is that you were a really nice guy before you hit what people would perceive as being successful. And you're a nice guy now, and you're not arrogant. That's the thing that I think is fantastic. One of the things I was trying to, think to myself before I was interviewing you today, I was thinking, why are you successful? Why is Matillion successful? Why are you a successful leader? And this is one of my takes on it as well, is that you're dealing with something that's techie, but you explain it in a language that a layperson understands. Back then, 2012, when we had our first conversation, you were talking about Zinger burgers as an example of data. And how do you know how many Zinger burgers you've sold? I remember it. But then I was looking, you love an analogy.
That is true.
You love it. And I love an analogy. And there was this analogy that you used as well. You're trying to describe what Matillion does. And you said it's like redefining data from iron ore into steel, so it's ready to use, and it works for me. Although I'm a tech journalist, I don't consider myself to be techie. That process is called data engineering, and the world doesn't have enough data engineers, which fundamentally is where Matillion comes in, isn't it?
Totally. Yeah, you're right. I do love a good analogy. And I still use that iron ore one quite a lot. I think I might have already used it this week, Chris. Yes. So we'd started off as this company that knew we wanted to be at the intersection of cloud and data. And what we did to start with was we used data in the cloud on behalf of our customers. We kind of built finished working solutions for our customers in the same way that today many of our customers do for themselves. And long story short, when you are building a data-based project, a data use case, there's a chunk of the work that's called the data engineering, and that's that iron ore to steel bit. You've got to dig the data out of the ground, or in the real life, you've got to go and find it in systems and pull it into one place. And then you've got to transform the data from its raw state to the state you need it to be to do something interesting with, just like you convert that iron ore into steel. And it turns out that when you start doing a bunch of this, as we were doing in the early days of Matillion, you realize that's most of the work. And it's gritty and it's repetitive and it takes a long time. It's valuable, but gritty, repetitive takes a long time. So if you want to go faster on your projects, that's the bit you need to optimize. And we wanted to go faster on our projects. We tried to buy some off-the-shelf technology to help us go quicker. We'd kind of optimized everything else. But this below the waterline part of the iceberg, the 70% of the work, we're like, well, if we don't get that bit quicker, we'll never be able to go quicker as a business. So in the end, having had a background, myself and Ed, a background in building software, in developing software, whilst it's often not the right answer to build a bespoke product, on this occasion, we decided it was. And Ed and a couple of guys that worked for him over the period of about a year built this data engineering technology. So yes, what we do is build data engineering software. Fundamentally, even today, what we do is solve the same challenge for our customers that we were solving for ourselves back then. Data engineering is most of the work. We wanted to go faster. We built a tool to make ourselves go faster. We increased our data productivity, our ability to do cool stuff with data. And that's still what Matillion does today. Our technology nowadays is called the Data Productivity Cloud, and its fundamental and sole reason for existence is to allow companies and data teams to engineer their data much faster.
That was the pivot you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
And that was when you saw that hockey stick growth as well. And it was just, you had a successful business, but you saw where the future was going and you became the master of your own destiny, really, by creating your own software. I interviewed you last in 2023 and you requoted something that an Australian hedge fund manager had said at the time. And that left an impression on me. And a lot of what you say genuinely leaves an impression on me. He said he likes to be disgusted with the person he was 2 years ago. So are you disgusted with the person you were 2 years ago when we last interviewed each other?
Yeah, in some ways. Yeah. So maybe that comes back to that part of our chat a few minutes ago where you're saying, I think you're really different.
Yeah.
I hope I'm not fundamentally different in terms of values and core personality, because that would mean it's all a facade that you're learning it, and hopefully that's not the case. But in terms of expertise and playbook and the things that you do, then definitely, as businesses grow, their needs change. And so if you're a participant in that business, particularly maybe a senior one, and therefore particularly perhaps the CEO, you've got to be growing at least as fast, if not faster, than the needs of the business change. And yeah, there's a bunch of stuff that I would have done 2 years ago that I don't do today. And hopefully in 2 years' time, I'll be disgusted with the person I am today. I mean, disgusted's laying it on thick, isn't it? But you know what I mean.
Works well for a podcast. But what I was going to say is that, like, I look at businesses and I look at people who've been successful and unsuccessful. And if you change as a person for the detriment of you in the business, that's a bad sign. But especially in the fast-moving world of business, and especially tech, if you don't move and change, then you become obsolete very quickly, and then you move backwards. And that's where I think you've evolved as a person as well. I suppose in a sense, you're going to use an analogy, you're a bit like a Russian doll. And iteration Matthew Scullion number 4 isn't what there was Matthew Scullion number 3. And Matthew Scullion number 5, talking in the third person like that, will be a different doll to the one that we've currently got. Going to talk about becoming a unicorn, because obviously in business circles and tech circles, becoming this fabled unicorn is like the pinnacle of success. It happened to you in 2021. You joined the ranks of Manchester's tech unicorns. So the last one, actually, you did a $150 million raise, which valued the business at $1.5 billion. And you said to me back in 2023, you told me that there were fewer unicorn founders, CEOs than people who'd ever been to space, which once again, I thought, wow, because that makes it real to me as an interviewer as well, makes you realize how unusual it is, even though going to space is less unusual these days.
Yeah. Olympic gold medals as well.
That must make you very proud. But when you were told, hey, you're the CEO of a unicorn business, you didn't like crack out the bunting, crack open the champagne. Word is, you jumped on a call. What was that feeling like?
First of all, there was like the CEO changey thing. So it's worth just dwelling on that for a moment. I hope that fundamentally as a human, I haven't changed that much.
Agreed.
Playbook has to change. And I think that when you start to flatline on that, that's probably the time to hand over the gloves to the next person, because the needs of your business are going to change. And if you're not able to stay above that line because you don't want to, or you're tired, or you've just run out of capacity, then that's going to cause problems for your business. I will say though, and just being totally honest, I heard a quote from another CEO, a former CEO, a guy called Brian. And I asked him a question, and his answer was, oh yes, Matthew, I was 100% more asshole when I was a CEO. Yeah. And there is an element of truth in the fact that, because I guess necessarily, right, like making a lot of decisions, you, I guess, need to get quite a lot of stuff done in a day. And so when you move out into the outside world and people don't furnish you with excellent information very quickly, you do get grumpy about it. So I don't want to say I've not changed at all. The assholeometer at times could maybe be slightly elevated as a byproduct of the job. And then, I mean, don't get me wrong. I am in the moment, if I'm asked on it in the calm of a lovely podcast studio by a nice person like you, Chris, I'm of course proud of that. And definitely we would have, and I'm sure still do, try to weaponize that in promoting our company. There's a couple of things about unicorn. So one is, it's just a judgment of value. It's like, congratulations, your house is now worth £1 million. And some of that is your business building expertise, I suppose. Some of it is where the market's up to as well, and markets can go up and down. And so I'm proud of it, and we've used it to help get our team excited, new team members excited, customers excited, get PR. But I think it's unwise to dwell on it too much, because valuations go up and down, right? If you let your house fall down and don't paint the window frames, it will decline in value, not increase. But the other thing is, when you're doing this stuff, things like becoming a unicorn, I suppose that is a nice moment, because it actually is something tacit. I'll tell you that it technically happened at about 4 o'clock in the morning during the pandemic. I've actually got a photograph somewhere of me signing the piece of paper that I had to wake my wife up to take the photograph. But it's not like you walk into a room and fireworks go off and it says you're a unicorn now, right? It's just signing a piece of paper. But, also you're always getting on with it, right? And perhaps in the technology business in particular, there's not that much stuff you can touch. And so an office opening, maybe that's a cool thing. Getting an award, maybe that's a cool thing. And those do give you a quick opportunity to reflect. But really, yeah, you're just going to be back to building. And the final point I'll just make here really quickly is, you very kindly attribute success to things that your guests, such as me, have done. You're like, oh, you have become a unicorn and you are successful. That's absolutely not how I feel. I feel we've made some steps on the way to hopefully doing something consequential, but I don't feel like we're anywhere near close to it yet. And therefore, just intellectually, it's hard for me to say, oh yeah, that felt great because we've made it. It's like, no, we just passed the 3-mile marker of the marathon.
You have been successful by any metric. I'm not comparing myself to you because, it would be trying to compare, chalk and cheese. But I am very uncomfortable at praise, always have been. If I do a really good event and people come up to me and say, oh, great event, fist pumping, et cetera, et cetera. If we do something really well, I'm really, really uncomfortable with it. Always have been. I sense you are as well. You're not somebody who feeds on that. You just do it, really. I don't know. Is that fair?
Yes. And there's a strength and the weakness there. The productive paranoia and the I think in perhaps any endeavor, thinking you're not done yet and wanting to keep driving forward is healthy in terms of getting to a better and better outcome. So that's the strength in it. Things often in life tend to end up and have an equal and opposite reaction. One thing that our colleagues in competitive geographies, particularly the US, are much better at than us, I think, is shouting about how brilliant they are. Not necessarily that correlated to the truth either, right? They shout about how brilliant they are until that becomes true. Whereas here in the UK, perhaps we undershout about how brilliant we are already. So it's like one of those, isn't it? They're overdoing it, we're underdoing it, and that actually can cost you in terms of dollars. And I think we value it as Brits, and we value it as Mancunians. We're kind of stoic and understated, aren't we? And those are things that we find attractive human qualities. And so at times I have to, it's a version of putting that suit and tie on. I have to try and put on a bit of a uniform for what the market needs and say, oh yes, we are amazing. And don't get me wrong, I'm incredibly proud of our company, and there are many amazing and talented people in it doing incredible things. But yeah, the way you and I would probably like to do it is be understated because it drives us to keep getting better, and it's just cool and British. Out on the outside world, actually there is utility, there is like literal dollar value in overtelling the story and shouting from the rooftops, which I find hard, but I do try to steel myself to do it.
I understand that. We're going to go for a quick break in a second, but I'm going to ask you one question before then, which is that you were the last Manchester unicorn, to be created. Right. Yeah, well, I think so. I think 2021. I'm not aware of any others. There's a few that have dropped off the unicorn list. And in terms of the UK, there are not many unicorns that are produced in the UK. There are, but not many. You're proof, though, that the North can create unicorns, aren't you? I mean, you don't have to be based in London, or you don't have to be based in the US. That must give you a lot of joy. And do you think there's nothing to stop you being a unicorn and being based in the North, in your opinion?
No, absolutely nothing to stop you at all. Like literally nothing to stop you. And I am very proud, by the way, to have built the beginnings of a consequential company headquartered here in Manchester. This whole comparison between Manchester and London, I just find it preposterous. So most people would probably think of Silicon Valley as the beating heart of technology entrepreneurialism, and they would think so rightly, right? Silicon Valley is quite long and has very bad traffic. So if you live at the bottom of it and you want to drive to San Francisco, there is a very valid chance that that commute will take as long as it takes to get from Manchester to London. It's close. We're a small island. We have trains and cars and phones. Like, we need as a country to stop saying, oh, the venture capital scene in, West Sheffield is terrible. It's like, okay, well, maybe get in the car and go to London, raise some venture capital, come back then. So yeah, there is literally zero reason why you can't build a consequential company in the UK or in Manchester. Now, it's not to say there aren't some practical challenges with all geographies, and Manchester has some, and San Francisco has some, and New York has some, and London has some. But yeah, what we do have a challenge with in the UK, I think, is our business building playbook overall. Because if you look at the relative size of the economy, we are not producing our fair share of consequential companies at the same clip as they are in the US. The US should produce more because it's a bigger economy, but we're out of kilter even by the time you've done that parity calculation. And I think that's because just of the playbook and attitude that we as society have, kind of our attitude to risk and our desire to do big, dangerous things that sometimes work out and often don't. As entrepreneurs, similarly, how we say, I'm going to try to solve a really big problem with a large total addressable market globally. And I'm just going to assume I'm going to do it and act accordingly until it either works or blows up. Like, we just don't do that often. And then finally, to some extent, not totally, but to some extent, our investment community is also a mirror of that, an effect or a cause, it doesn't really matter, but are participants in that, because the way we typically like to invest, it reflects how society works in the UK, that we don't like risk. So we invest to get a modest return reliably, rather than to back 10 things in the hope that one of them will become exceptional and change the world. And if you do that, that's what you get. You get a modest return reliably, but you don't get Apple or Google or Amazon.
What I find fascinating is that you said that you're 3 miles into a marathon, right? You've become a unicorn. You founded the business in 2011, and you're 3 miles into a marathon, which suggests that you've still got a long, long, long way to go. This interview's got a reasonable distance to go, but we're going to go for a quick break, and then I'm going to hit you, Matthew, with what I know as the big question. Right, so in April, Katy Perry, and I know you're a big Katy Perry fan. In fact, if I said to you, if you could listen to one Katy Perry track, what would it be? What would it be?
I do quite like Katy Perry though, and so do my my girls at home. So can I go with Last Friday Night?
You can go with whatever you want. It sounds a bit like Desert Island Disc now, but they've got the rights.
It wouldn't be one of my Desert Island Discs.
So Katy Perry and 5 other women went into space aboard Jeff Bezos's Blue Origin rocket. The flight lasted 11 minutes, took the 6 women more than 100 kilometers above Earth, crossed the internationally recognized boundary of space, and gave them a few moments of weightlessness. Well worth the trip. So it's fair to say the trip caused a bit of a media storm. But if you got the phone call, Matthew, hey, Matthew, I'm putting together a flight for tech unicorns into space, would you go?
Oh, I think we're going to need 2 answers here, Chris. The market facing on the podcast with Chris answer is, I think it's a little bit vain and maybe not the best use of the world's resources to send a load of celebs briefly into just about space. I don't think the world became a better place for doing that. I do, of course, think the technology is amazing, and some of the other stuff cheaper space flight can achieve has the opportunity to make the world a better place. But yeah, I think, boosting a load of pop stars up there doesn't feel like the best way to make the good ship Planet Earth go faster. So that's my official answer. Now, if we were to test this, if my man Jeff reached out and was like, Matthew, what are you doing in the weekend? Do you want to go to space? I am not quite sure that I am, quite that moral enough to say no. But it's unlikely to be tested, isn't it? So let's go with the nutritious answer.
I've just got Jeff coming through on my phone now. Actually,
again.
Okay,
leave me alone, Jeff. I've told you.
Sorry, I said Jeff. I mean, I've got an Amazon order coming through today. This is the Northern Leaders podcast. Are there any Northern leaders that you really admire?
Yes, Mr. Burnham, I think he's doing a great job. For anyone that's not been to Manchester recently, we've just hired a new senior executive at Matillion that studied at Manchester University at the beginning of his career. And he then went out and spent 20, 30 years in Silicon Valley and then the Pacific Northwest and working for startups and then big tech companies. And he's just joined us, and he said it feels like a homecoming coming back to Manchester. And he came over for the interview process, and he's like, "Is this Manchester?" Because the skyline's changed so much, and the city's really got a buzz. Jeremy Clarkson, of course, the voice of the UK, described Manchester as Manchester definitely isn't the UK's second city because it's its first. Was in the paper the other week. So Andy Burnham and the team running the city, I think, are doing a great job. But I think we probably have to go for something less transient than that if you want a leader you genuinely look up to. I think Turing, for me, as a computer scientist, has to be a candidate for two reasons. One is, the father of much of modern computing, but done in a stylish and low-key and often against big headwinds through persecution way. So I think we all have a lot to thank Turing for. But of course, he's also a man that was born in London and chose to move to Manchester, which I think you and I, Chris, would find as very enlightened then and now. But the other one I'd go for, maybe this would be the all-time great for me, it'd be Emmeline Pankhurst, because that's a real leader, someone with a shared goal that against tremendous adversity rallied a team, a movement behind her, and literally did change.
That would be a great dinner party, Emmeline Pankhurst,
Andy Burnham, Turing, Emmeline Pankhurst, you and me, Chris,
absolutely.
Jeff Bezos, Katy Perry,
and Jeremy Clarkson. We'll bring Jeremy Clarkson along as well because we've got lots of farm food as well.
I'm not sure we should sit Emmeline and Jeremy next to each other, but
no, it's a bit like that call from Jeff Bezos. It's never going to happen, and that will never happen. A phrase I've heard you use before is, "I try not to drink my own Kool-Aid." And you're a modest guy. I think it comes out in the podcast as well. I want to take you back to 2021. It's the year you became a unicorn. You won the EY Entrepreneur of the Year award. As part of your prize, you're flown out to Monaco with your family.
Yeah, it's cool.
With your kids. And there are signs on the street lamps with your lovely face, and I'm thinking to myself, I've got two daughters. You're not crying, are you, by that praise?
No. Even though that's what every podcast host wants, isn't it?
Absolutely. Can we get that? Can we make that like it's like he's crying at that? What's that like? I mean, when you walk in with your kids, are they not super impressed? Hey, Dad, a phrase I've never heard. Dad, that's your face on a lamppost. I mean, that must be amazing. I would be drinking my own Kool-Aid, I'll be honest.
I don't know you would, mate. I know you. You're a pretty grounded guy.
Yeah.
But in my case, at least, you don't buy into all that stuff personally. Don't get me wrong, it was lovely to be invited out to Monaco, and EY did a spectacular job at making an exquisite event. I mean, Bono was there, on the table next to me at the sort of final awards thing, as the other CEOs and my face is going up on the big screen. It's like Stella McCartney and I'm trying to remember the name of that model. Quite a sort of it girl, doesn't matter. Yeah. Anyway, that was the next table along from me. Notice, not my table. Okay. But personally, you just think to yourself, this is really cool and I feel very lucky to be a part of it, but you don't buy into the Kool-Aid. The kids, the challenge is them taking the mickey, because a couple of years prior to that, one of them, my kids have these Alexas to use as alarm clocks, really. And one of them one day decided to ask Alexa who I was. So they said, who's Matthew? And it just replied back, because I guess it can look it up on the internet. It just said, Matthew's the CEO of Matillion. And they thought this was hilarious. And they like to tease me that, Daddy, you're famous because Alexa knows who you are. So we get to Monaco and they're like, Daddy, you're famous because Alexa knows who you are. And then they see this damn sign, right? Literally hanging off a lamppost in the middle of Monaco. And they're like, Daddy, we told you you're famous. I'm like, no, I'm not. It's just, EY's marketing company paid to put a sign up to try and impress me. That's all it is, kids. But it's fun.
But that gets back to the point as well about, praise doesn't necessarily sit easily with you but I think it's great because I think kids are so honest and they keep you grounded as well.
Yeah.
You're proudly headquartered in Manchester, but you've got a base in the US as well. Ever tempted to decamp hook, line and sinker to the US?
Yes and no. For the business, I kind of do whatever's necessary. One bit of praise that to me would be much more powerful than, the events management company that did EY's gig in Monaco, putting my name on a lamppost, which is just synthetic praise. But what does resonate with me is real honest praise. And I remember a guy that I worked with for a number of years, a good lad called Christian, he once wrote about me to someone else, Matthew will do whatever is needed to succeed regardless of the personal cost. And so that's probably reasonably true, actually. And if I needed to go live in New York or somewhere else in the US to drive the business forward, I 100% would do that.
That's a great quote. And a great endorsement. Matthew would do anything, whatever the personal cost to get something done, or words to that effect, from a colleague of yours.
Yeah,
that would mean more to me than winning the EY Entrepreneur.
1,000%. Yeah. So that resonates. Yeah. The other stuff, it's really cool and it's flattering and it's useful for the business because it gets you PR. But you 100% don't want to listen to that stuff. It's just it's business and corporate stuff. But someone personally saying something nice about you, or some, especially if it happens to be true. Through that lens, 100%. Now I also have my wife and my kids to think about. So whether that was me doing Monday to Friday a couple of weeks and then coming home, or the family coming with me, then that would depend on what Caroline and the girls wanted. And also, the most important things to me in the world today are Matillion, my wife, and my children. I said that in the wrong order. Yeah. But of course, I probably won't always be the CEO of Matillion. I will always be Caroline's husband and my children's father. And so you have to think about what's best for them. And regardless of the personal cost, yes, but regardless of the cost to them, no. And you'd have to find a balance there, wouldn't you? Just going back to the locations, by the way, yes, Manchester, yes, US in Denver, Colorado, and also nowadays Hyderabad in India.
Absolutely.
Big team there.
Absolutely. And if ever I got an invite to watch the IPL in Hyderabad, I would accept it, much the same way as you might accept a call from Jeff Bezos to go into space. There was a great leadership quote that I heard from you. And I'll try to remember what it was, so I've paraphrased it, but it goes something like this, right? Tell me if you remember this. There are two types of problems in business. The first is people problems, and the second are people problems that you haven't yet worked out are people problems.
Yeah.
Does that sound true?
Yeah.
Yeah. Everything comes down to people.
Yeah. I guess if we take any seminal company that we all understand, you mentioned Jeff Bezos there. Turns out he's a pretty decent operator by the look of it. Yeah. Built Amazon and then Blue Origin, the spaceship company, I'm sure a bunch of other things. Some of that, a lot of that is down to him and his ambition and drive around that shared goal and the playbook and particular je ne sais quoi, I suppose, that he brought to it 100%. But, he's not simultaneously in all of those warehouses and designing all of those Amazon Web Services technologies and strapping the engines to the side of the spaceship, right? He's not doing all of those things, as is obvious. So you have to have people doing that. You have to have team members doing that. So those team members have to be aligned. They have to be working in an organizational environment that's productive. They have to be the right players on the pitch. I think you can learn almost everything you need to know about that concept by just looking at sport and the role of the coach. fans don't tend to give the coach a lot of quarter if he or she is failing to take the decisions to get the right 11 or 15 players on the pitch and getting them working together. And if one of those people used to be amazing and now isn't in sport, then that you probably cut them and bring in the next player. If they're arranged on the pitch in the wrong configuration, and the coach will get clipped unless he or she takes some action around that. It's quite similar in business, and you can attribute almost every aspect, certainly in a technology company, almost everything you do. How good are the marketing messages? How good are the sales plays? How good are the sales results? The win-loss ratios and the pipeline and the land average customer value and the net expansion over time. Ultimately, those are all down to how well you have built a team and how good the players on the pitch are.
Yeah, no, it's everything comes down to people. And I play cricket, and someone says, "Do you bat first when you win?" At cricket, do you bat first? And somebody says, "You bat first 9 times out of 10. The 10th time you think about it and bat first." It comes down to people. Every business is about people.
Yeah.
You sit on the Capital Markets Industry Task Force, which aims to ensure the UK is a place where great companies can start, grow, and scale, and to improve the country's capital markets as well. So, where do you think why do you think the UK produces relatively few unicorns, and where do you sit on the whole investment debate?
So it's start, grow, scale, and stay in the UK. The UK's got an abundance of the raw materials required to build consequential businesses that change the world, and we've got deep sector discipline, sector expertise. In lots of really cool sectors that have big problems to solve, scalable unit economics, global markets. You are right, though. Overall, you always sense the conversation on unicorns, and respectfully, I'll say I don't, because to me that is a quite early milestone in the business building journey. Actually, the UK is number 3 in the world for creating unicorns, and number 2 is China, and number 1 is the US. So for a pokey little island in Northern Europe, that's not a bad knock, is it? What we don't do is create big businesses. A unicorn isn't a big business. We create a lot less $100 million revenue businesses than unicorns. And, technically, because a unicorn is just a valuation, you could have no revenue and be a unicorn. And there's nothing wrong with that. But the thing I'm trying to point out here is it's just a milestone on the way to building something big. But a big company is something that you and me use every day, even though the headquarters is 4,000 miles away. And so does, the Chris and Matthew in France, and the Chris and Matthew in Germany, and the Chris and Matthew in Japan and China and Australia. That's a big company. Apple's a big company. Amazon's a big company. Meta's a big company. And then, there's a line of ones that most people in day-to-day life won't have heard of, but they've still created huge amounts of value, huge amounts of revenue. Someone like NVIDIA's become very famous recently because of its work in AI and GPUs. But, a company we work with, Snowflake, make cloud data platforms. If you work in data, you've definitely heard of them. Most people wouldn't have. So that's gone from not existing 10 years ago as a material trading company. I think they were in stealth mode 10 years ago, to $3 billion of revenue. $3 billion of revenue. That's a proper business. And it's those that we don't create in the UK. Now, where do I stand on the investment piece? Capital Markets Industry Task Force, as the name implies, we tend to meet in the London Stock Exchange. Most of the people on the task force are stewards or active participants in London's capital markets, and we and they are doing a really good job at driving reform in the way the capital markets work, the way the UK's absolutely staggeringly enormous pile of capital from our pension funds, world-leading pile of capital is deployed into public and private businesses. That's all awesome. Huge amount of progress made. Will make the world a better place and the boat go faster. I think the reason I'm there, or certainly the reason I've chosen to be there, is because I think the capital market stuff is really important, but I think the fundamental reason that we don't build snowflakes and Amazons and Metas as regularly or at all here in the UK is because the playbook with which that we try to do that is wrong. And yes, that is to somewhat the extent in the case of investors. I think it's more so the case with actually the entrepreneurs and the CEOs. And I think both of those things are to some extent a reflection of society and our societal perception of risk, and how we celebrate success, we don't, and how we get sanguine with failure, we're not. And if societally you don't like risk, you beat people up when they fail and you pull them down when they succeed, then it's not a massive surprise that our entrepreneurs don't set off on their business building journey thinking, I'm going to build $1 billion revenue business. I just believe that's going to be true. I'm going to act accordingly and I'm going to make it happen, right? If you line 10 people up to do that, maybe one of them will be successful if they all act like that. And that one, that will be the snowflake or the Apple or the Meta or the Netflix, right? And the other 9 will blow up and you'll never hear from them again, although hopefully they'll have another go. That's what we don't do in the UK.
What's fascinating, like I say, is that you're right, the media are obsessed about the term unicorn, whereas you almost don't like the term because you just see it as a means to an end and as part of a journey. One observation that I have as somebody who's been around the block a long time is that where you're very different to a lot of CEOs that I interview is you really listen to the question. It's noticeable. You wouldn't even realise you're doing it. Where do you stand on artificial intelligence?
Well, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
It's going to change every aspect of how we all work, live and play much quicker than I think most people think. It's also a massive focus for Matillion. We're spending millions of pounds every 90 days investing in R&D around AI. And what we're being able to do with AI technology and foundation models for our customers is just super awesome. And I'm really excited about it. So maybe if I just dwell there for like 20 more seconds, earlier in our podcast, we talked about how Matillion's fundamental raison d'etre, our purpose in life, the thing that we've been waking up and thinking about every morning for many, many years now, is how do we make data engineering teams more productive? To do that, we've built a software platform over the last 10 years. We sell that software platform to our customers, and human beings use the software platform to build data pipelines to do the iron ore refinery, right? We sell the platform, customer provides the humans use the platform to build data pipelines. All sound sensible enough? That was yesterday. Where we are now and going into the forward is we still sell the platform, but we also sell the labor, the digital labor. The platform comes in the box with it a team of data professionals that will do the work for you.
So the data labor, is that the AI?
Yeah. So the human labor, that labor of doing data engineering, data quality, data operations, these are jobs. Like, people have these jobs. That work, we can now codify it as an AI, as an agent, we're starting to give these things like names, like anthropomorphize them. Can I say that word properly, by the way? You can maybe sort that out in the edit, Chris.
Well, I can't sort it out. So
but we make them human because that's what they seem like. And so suddenly we're getting into a situation where we can go to the customer and say, hey, you know how you've only got 10 data engineers, but you've always got the work for 100? And we spent the last 10 years giving them a platform that makes those 10 data engineers more effective. And we've been really successful at that. We've made them 3 times more productive. So the 10 people can do the work of 30 people. Now I can say, you've got 10 people and you need to do the work of 100. Well, I can give you the other 90 people in the box as AIs, and they never get tired. And they can work 24 hours a day. And by the way, if one day you need 180 or 270 or 500 or 1,000 of them, it'll do that as well. They'll just automatically scale up. So AI for Matillion and our customers, profound, super exciting, And hopefully you can see the smile on my face. For society, though, it's going to be really interesting. There's been big technology revolutions in the past, and they are disruptive. And what people do between 9 till 5 changes. That is going to be the case with AI very quickly for a lot of people. And then one interesting thing is normally those technology revolutions have been affected by some sort of like mechanization. So like a machine does the work instead of a person does the work. It's what we've been able to do with our hands as humans that's been disrupted. With AI, though, it's the work we've been able to do with our brains that's being disrupted. So, I'll give you one example. In financial services, such as, investment companies and stockbrokers and venture capitalists and private equity companies, a lot of the work's done in doing research about markets, about companies, and like super smart people work really, really hard to like do a report, right, about a certain industry category. So you may have tried this out. You can definitely already today in April of 2025, you can definitely pull out your smartphone from your pocket, type the question that your team of MBAs would have done for you into, your large language model of choice, and press the deep research button. And 20 minutes later, for $5, it's just done what would have taken a month for 2 or 3 of the smartest people in the room. Scale that up to the global economy. That is disruptive with a capital D. Yeah. For Matillion, I'm incredibly excited. And I think we have a super compelling proposition for our customers that can finally help us accelerate and then blast through the vision, the mission that we've always had, which is to eliminate data friction. We can do that with AI, and we are doing, and it's awesome. And then separately, for society at large, I just think most people are under-indexed on how much the world's going to change because of AI. There's a final frontier, which we're not at yet, and which I'm unable to tell you whether we will get to and how long we'll get to. That the artificial general intelligence and the super AGI levels, which we're not at yet. Everything I've talked about today, that's current technology. Artificial general intelligence is when AI becomes generally smarter than the smartest human that's ever lived. Superintelligence is where AI becomes smarter than all humans that have ever lived combined. If we make those things happen, and I think, I'm not a Stanford PhD in AI, right? Yeah. So this is what I've read and my opinion. But there's a good phrase, AGI might be humanity's last invention. Yeah. Because if you invent AGI, the AGI itself is smart enough to invent the super intelligence. Once you've got the super intelligence, we no longer matter. I actually punched this into ChatGPT in a kind of recursive like mind hop there to sort of say like, what do you think is the statistical probability of artificial superintelligence becoming the dominant species on planet Earth, and by when? And the stat, press the deep research button, it crunched all the numbers for me. The stat is that is a 40% probability by the end of this century that humanity is no longer the dominant species on planet Earth. So 3 answers on AI. Incredibly excited about what we're doing at our company to make the lives of our customers better. We used to sell a platform used by human labor. We're now selling a platform that includes digital labor in the box. In society at large, with current technology, I think every aspect of how we work, live, and play is going to change, probably broadly for the better in the end, but the disruption is huge. And the first in type is that it's disruption of knowledge work, not hands work. And then finally, the kind of Terminator movie stuff is not that Terminator movie, and it's a 40% probability that humanity is no longer the dominant species on Earth by the end of this century, which my grandchildren will be very much alive in.
Last question I'm going to ask you, and incidentally, I think with AI, I agree with pretty much everything you've said. I think from a content creation point of view, I look at content creation generated by AI, and it's identikit content creation. I think if I'm looking at it thinking, I know that's not authentic. That looks like it's been generated by AI. That will change and get better. I'm excited, but I'm scared at the same time as well. But it's coming. It's here. Last question I want to ask you. And the thing with when we put the Northern Leaders list together, this isn't just based on the most successful entrepreneurs. It's not just business. It's aimed at the public sector, charity, sports.
Yeah, rightly so. Yeah,
absolutely. You are successful in your career, no question about that at all. You do a lot of work in terms of charities all over the world as well. That's a big part of who you are, and Northern Leaders is about paying it forward and supporting people less fortunate than yourselves as well. I want to just put that on the record, even though I'm not going to discuss it simply for time, really. The last question is this. Many, many, many years from now, many years from now, when, it comes to coining your epitaph on Matthew Peter Scullion, what would you like it to say?
Any person that wants to write their own epitaph, I am sure will never get to do it. So
ChatGPT, what do you want to say about Matthew Scullion? What would you want to say hypothetically? I mean, I know Jeff Bezos has phoned me 3 times now, but hypothetically, because it will never happen, what would you want people to remember you for?
Okay, well, thank you for rephrasing the question, because you're never going to catch me on record. Okay. You once caught me on record saying the nickname my children have for me, and the next day I was getting calls from investors saying, Matthew, why is this nickname just appeared in the newspapers? Yeah. So you're not going to catch me saying what I'd like my epitaph to be, because I think that would be desperately self-involved. But I think remembered as is a perfectly nice thing, isn't it? I hope my friends would and my family would remember me as loyal and kind and fun, and I hope in business, I hope I'm able to maintain that energy to make the world a better place through whatever our endeavors are. I think doing business with integrity is important to me. Going all the way back to the beginning of our conversation, there's 3 co-founders of Matillion. People know Ed and I because we're the kind of front office, the tech and the CEO. There's also my particular friend, a gentleman called Peter McCord, and I've been lucky to know him for well over 20 years. And I think from him more than anybody else, I feel I've learned that integrity is one of those few currencies, maybe along with time, that like once you've spent it, you can't get it back. And so I'd like to hope that people will remember me as having high integrity, and then not taking ourselves too seriously as we do it all, Chris. Yeah,
listen, that's not an epitaph because you wouldn't do an epitaph. Incidentally, if anybody wants to find out that nickname, they can just Google it.
Come on, man.
But you're right, absolutely. Life's too short. Enjoy the ride and try and be a nice person and try and leave the world a better place than the one that you came into it. They're all the things that I like. That's what we try and encourage with Northern Leaders. Matthew, it's been an absolute joy. Genuinely, I've really, really enjoyed it.
Me too.
So that was Northern Leaders. That was Matthew Scullion, and I'll be back after the break with a few thoughts. Business Cloud provides tech insight with Byte. To get the best business tech news straight into your inbox, just subscribe to our free newsletter. Details on our website. So this is the bit of the podcast when I reflect on the interview. I just checked, actually, it was 1 hour and 17 minutes, but it felt like 5 minutes. I think that's the sign of a good interview. I think Matthew was everything I hoped he would be. He was funny, he was authentic, he really listens to the questions, and he really thinks about the answers. He gets excited about certain things, talking about AI. I mentioned at the very start that he doesn't take himself too seriously, and I think that came across. He takes his work really, really seriously. I don't think praise and attention sits and rests easily on his shoulders. He's not that sort of guy, really, and he wasn't that sort of guy in 2012. I think what's really nice is that, he is northern to his roots. He's very, very proud of the North. He's proud to have co-founded a business that's headquartered in Manchester. That's a unicorn. But this isn't the end of his journey. Reaching that billion-dollar unicorn status, can be the end of a lot of people's journeys. It's not for Matthew Scullion as well. He's a fantastic guy. He's a brilliant, brilliant Northern leader. And I think that came across in the interview, and I'm so glad we got him on.